My feeling about it is this. Firstly, I think it's really great that the film has now got done. And it is proof that if you stick with something, if you have a story that you want to tell and you believe in it, you can virtually will it into existence if you are that committed to it. Because Amma had talked before about how people thought it was too broad of a canvas, that she had the stuff that she hadn't done, and so in many ways the films that she was making from Belle, United Kingdom, were a way of demonstrating that this is what she could do. And also, as we were talking about in that interview, primarily a writer first, so somebody who starts with that idea of finding a story, and then the directing is therefore a way of then telling the story. So the story itself is crucial. And you look at all Amma Asante's films, whether it's Way of Life and Belle, United Kingdom, and what they're all doing to some extent is they're telling a story about identity, about who you are, about where you fit in a particular world. And I mean, this is voiced quite explicitly in the case of Belle, but we also have it in the historical story of the United Kingdom of this couple who find themselves in a situation which they absolutely hadn't envisaged, and the central woman is suddenly in this whole other world that she didn't. So the whole idea of the United Kingdom, so which I think works very well. In terms of this, as you said yourself, this is not a story that I knew before. I hadn't heard of this at all until I saw Where Hands Touch. And one of the things that Amma Asante has done throughout her career is to find historical stories, find the things that exist at the margins of the larger stories that you know, and then use them as a way of discussing identity and character. And the other thing that she has done all the way through, and this refers back to Belle, was to make something which is a drama about something very serious. In that case, it was drama about slavery and racial injustice, but also give it that kind of the appeal of a Jane Austen story, something which has comedy and those elements in it. So all that stuff fits perfectly, and I can see exactly why it is that Amma Asante would have wanted to have told this story above all stories, and why it was the thing that she needed to do. And I think that the performances are very good. You mentioned Amanda Stenberg, who I think is terrific, and it's a very difficult role to carry off, and I think she does it really well. But I also think it is worth acknowledging that she's surrounded. George Mackay, I think, is a terrific actor. Christopher Eccleston, you mentioned as well. So, it's not just that there is one great performance. There is a very good performance at the centre of it, but it is also more than that. My reservations are probably threefold. The first one, which is a kind of film critic-y thing, is we were talking when Rafe Fiennes' White Crow. Sorry, thank you for reminding me.
They were talking Russian.
Came out about the mainstream cinematic convention of having characters talking in English but in a sort of foreign inflected language. And one of the things that it's usually used as is if you're talking about a mainstream movie, you say, well, they have to be speaking in English because actually people don't want mainstream subtitle films, which I have an issue with. And I, obviously, in an ideal world, I would like this story to have been done in German. But then there is a million reasons why not to do it, because, can you direct it in German? I don't know, okay? But it is definitely true that coming hot on the heels of White Crow, which was so adventurous in terms of everyone will be speaking in the correct language. So there's that issue. The second one is that, to be honest with you, from a film critic's point of view, I can see the edges of the production. There were moments when I felt like I can see how far the production can go, and I can also see the limitations of it. Because all films are made under, what I mean is, all films are made under slightly restricted circumstances, and occasionally you become aware of the edge of the circumstances.
What sort of thing?
Like, for example, there are certain times during locations and certain times in which the artifice is the thing that I noticed. I sort of thought, okay, fine, I can see what that is trying to be, but I'm not quite being suckered into it. And that leads me to my main hesitation, which is this. The best of Amma Asante's movies for me have all delivered an emotional sucker punch. So I have bought in completely to the characters and to the situations and the circumstances. Floods of Tears in United Kingdom, which I know some people thought was melodramatic and schmaltzy or sentimental. I remember watching Belle when there is the central confrontation about why is it that I can't sit at the table, and my primary response to that was emotional. I have to be honest and say that whilst I was watching Where Hands Touch, I didn't get that emotional sucker punch. I never got that thing of being completely emotionally involved in it. Now, there may be a number of reasons for that, but I think one of the reasons is that the melding of the individual story and the wider, the wider horror story, in which it plays out, is a very, very difficult balance. And I didn't get pulled into it. So I did watch the whole film with a sense of one remove. I did watch it thinking, this is really interesting. That is a really good performance. I don't know this story, and what you're doing with it is really intriguing, and I can see exactly where it fits. What I didn't get was, I've gone with it and I've forgotten that I'm forgotten that what I'm doing is watching a story be told. I mean, almost, it's a stupid thing to say, almost like a kind of Brechtian alienation thing, that I found myself watching it rather than being engulfed in it. And I think to some extent, that's my primary reservation, because I think in terms of the story that it's telling and the way in which it's telling its story, it's everything that you would expect from an Amorosanti film. It's intelligent, it's well played, it's thoughtful, it's dealing with this kind of knotty issue of identity. But what it lacked for me, and I think maybe the reason, who knows, maybe the reason is this: if you are completely devoted to a story and you are completely inside it, it may be that you find it's more difficult to bring somebody else along with you. If you're outside of a story and you're having to bring the audience in and you're having to, those things work. What I felt was, I mean, this is a fairly regular occurrence, that if anybody has a body of work, the thing that they care most passionately about is often the thing that some audiences find it hardest to connect with. And this is not true of all audiences, incidentally, because as you saw from the response in Toronto, it clearly did have an emotional wallet for many people. But for me, I found myself looking at it and thinking, yes, I like that. Yes, I like that. Yes, I can see that as a limitation. But what I didn't get was emotionally swept up in it. And that's unusual for me from an Amorosanti film. But I'd be lying if I said if I didn't say it was true. But it doesn't mean that there aren't things there that I'm. Plus, I think the fact that the film has now happened and she's proven that she can do it, I think is in itself a kind of, there's a sense of relief and triumph about it. It was the film that everyone said you couldn't do.